I'm collegiate angler Spencer Clark. You know, fall the time of the year when the bass are in transition, a lot of times you have to cover a lot of water in order to catch a lot of fish. And one of my favorite techniques to go out there and do this time of the year is cranking. There's a couple things you need to keep in mind though when you're choosing the kind of equipment that you're going to go out there and throw a crankbait with. One of the most important things you can take into consideration is your rod. You want to make sure you have a nice long rod like this Ayers copperhead cranking stick, and make sure it has a real soft action in the tip. A rod like this is going to allow those fish to take the bait a lot deeper in their mouth. You're not going to lose as many fish during a day's time. You're also just going to catch a lot more fish because you're not going to be pulling the bait away from them to begin with. The next thing you need to take into consideration is your reel. You want to make sure you got a bait cast reel with a little bit slower gear ratio on it. You know, throw a 5-3 to 1, you know, a 6-3 to 1 reel. It's hard to step up to like a burner type reel because a lot of times you can just pull your bait away from the fish too quick. You're just moving your bait too quick. It's hard to slow down, whereas if you're using a slower reel, you can always speed up. For my cranking, when I'm cranking water less than 6 feet deep, I like to throw a copolymer line. I like to throw Gamma's high performance copolymer. A copolymer line, it just allows my bait to come through the brush and the rocks a lot better. You know, it doesn't sink like a fluorocarbon line does. So when I stop that bait, when I run it into a log and I stop that bait, it's going to float up a lot easier, and I'm just going to be a lot more productive. I'm not going to get hung up as much. I'm going to be able to cover a lot more water. If I'm cranking water deeper than 6 feet, I like to spool up with fluorocarbon line. I'm going to spool up with, you know, Gamma's Edge fluorocarbon in, you know, 10-12 pound test line, because it's going to allow me to get my bait a lot deeper. I'm not so worried about hanging up as much. You know, I'm trying to get my bait down there to where the fish are. I'm also, with the fluorocarbon line, it's going to be a lot more sensitive just because the line is so much more dense. You're going to feel those fish that are hitting your crankbait a lot deeper. And when I go out there in the fall, you know, and I'm trying to get on these crankbait fish, you know, I'm really keying in on the windy areas. Those areas seem to really produce, you know, for a crankbait bite. You know, I might see some wind blowing into a pocket, and I'm going to go in there and check it out and see if there's any bait fish in there. You know, I might pull up on a windy point. You know, I see some fish are active on a windy point. I'm going to pull up there. I'm going to make a couple casts. You know, it just takes a couple casts to, you know, see sometimes if there's fish in the area. And you know, the crankbait, once again, you know, allows you to cover a lot of water. Smack Tackle's got a couple new baits out this fall. The flutter bait, if you haven't heard of it, it's a new bait that's coming out. It's kind of like a rattle trap, kind of like a blade bait. It comes through the grass really well, perfect size to mimic those gizzard shad in a lot of the lakes here in the Midwest. They also offer in a bigger version if you're looking for that bigger bite at the end of the day, that kicker fish. You get this bait down there real deep and crank a lot of those points, get that reaction bite. They got a couple different shallow running crankbaits out there, like the Giz 4. Giz 4 is a series of crankbaits from Smack Tackle. Is a great bait to throw here down on the Ozark Lakes. Mimics that gizzard shad. The bait's got a real nice finish to it. Looks just like a gizzard shad. Baits come with real great hooks. You got extra sharp VMC treble hooks. It's going to be a great bait this fall when you're fishing those docks, fishing that shallow timber. Definitely one you're going to want to go out there and give a try. You know, say the fish aren't biting so good and you need to downsize. You want to pick up a Giz 3 crankbait, just like, you know, the big brother Giz 4. This shallow running crankbait is great for when the fish get a little bit tight lipped. You know, great around shallow timber, great around docks. Just an excellent bait to pick up. Extra sharp VMC treble hooks. Fish get a little bit deeper. Smack Tackle's got this deep diving Giz 4 series crankbait out that they came out with. It's a great bait to throw behind somebody that's throwing a DD22. Gives the fish a little bit different action, different profile. It looks just like a gizzard shad, which is what a lot of times the bass are keying in on the fall. It's going to be an excellent bait to have in your box if you're cranking those deep brush piles around docks or points. If you haven't checked out Smack Tackle, make sure you check them out. www.smacktackle.com.